Hello, welcome to my Rage Gamers review. I am Emily, and this is my first solo review for Ratchet and Clank All for One. The story starts off with Ratchet and Clank 2 years after the Great Clock, now in retirement when they are called upon to take President Quark to his award ceremony for the Intergalactic Tool of Justice Award, falling into Nefarious' plan to kill them using a reanimated Zuru. But this time things go awry as Nefarious is forced to join the trio on an unknown planet. I admit, I myself, as a big fan of the Insomniac franchise, found this game mildly disappointing and far different from what I anticipated. The game starts off with you fighting the Ziggurat in Luminopolis, but this time you have the choice of playing Ratchet, Clank, Quark, or Nefarious. As you can see, you also have friends or strangers to play along with you as other characters and gain bolts and points for themselves, which is a fun way to bring in multiplayer, both online and offline, to a franchise such as Ratchet and Clank. You can also use team combos in the game, and even have to work together to get across obstacles such as using the grapple hooks and opening the bolt boxes, which tends to come later, but it is still there. And you also have more enemies that will come at you throughout the game, and a lot bigger and more powerful ones, so it helps to have other players to help you pick them off. You also still have all your weapons like the Plasma Whip and the Negotiator. Even though they come in different names, it is still a relief to me, because from the beta version it did not seem like you had much in the way of weapons and gadgets. You also have the ability to call others over to you, which helps if you're looking for a way over an obstacle or to open a door, and someone has found that way. You also have gadgets, such as your grapple hook, and later on a vacuum gun that can be used to traverse over gaps where grappling cannot be used, which I find to be a creative idea that never really could be used before. I enjoyed use of the triangle button in activating elevators and grapple hooks, mostly because a common problem that is found not only in this game, but in other games such as Little Big Planet, is that you don't have to wait for the rest, and someone tends to run ahead and leave the others behind trying to catch up. Or it's hard when you're being attacked by a large enemy you can't take on alone, and you could use some more firepower. But with this game, you're actually forced to wait for all the players to get into position and tap the triangle button, which helps keep everyone together and generally makes your experience somewhat less frustrating from impatient players or lagging players, depending on who you are. Now, as Ash and I did before in our pre-release review, I'd like to have a quick chat about the graphics. I find that the graphics were not as nice and less realistic in Ocarina of Time, especially with the details on the fur and just everything else looked great in that game, but in this one, it looks a lot more anime and even childish, but it's a lot easier to focus now on what you're doing than to be constantly looking at all the detail. I'm not saying everybody does that, and I'm not saying that detail is not important. But when playing a game, detail does not have a whole lot of importance when it comes to the gameplay, but more when you're watching the cutscenes. Now, the hard part for me will be to point out the downfalls of the game, which I don't like to do, but these really annoyed me while I was playing. My one pet peeve in All for One was that the ability to manipulate the camera angles is gone. Like, they took it out completely, and I for one like to be able to manipulate the camera angles so that I can see everything that is going on and what may have slipped behind me or any enemies that are behind, because it's really hard now when they're automatically changing the camera angles so that you can't see anything behind you, and you have to turn and walk back, which kind of wastes time. So, another part of the missing camera angles is that they put the weapons wheel there, and so whenever I instinctively go to manipulate the camera angles of the game, it freezes and I go to the weapons wheel, which I don't want. It's just a pain. Another thing that bothers me is the jumping. The jumping in the game is, I don't even want to use words for it. It's awful. It's annoying. Mostly from what I saw on Ratchet and Clank, which are the only two characters I've actually tried so far. It's harder to jump now because the designers want you to be so dependent on the other players, which you may or may not have. It's also a pain when trekking to Susie's village and you have those bugs to pick up rocks and destroy your path. The ability to jump would be nice to have there. And that leads me to another point I dislike, which is the dependency you have on the other players. It's crucial that you depend on the others to help you, and that is hard to go on when you're playing as one player. Yes, they give you a CPU character, but it just proves how badly you have to depend on them throughout the game. You constantly need the other person's help, from traversing a gap to drawing a bridge. Yes, this is a multiplayer game, but it's tough on a player when they have to depend on a computer-programmed character to stay where they are so that you can get to your next position safely. That was annoying as all get out, was that you would take a CPU character and you'd shoot them across a gap. If you left them for like 3 seconds, they came back. Especially when you're trying to jump over and they just get up into the air and you fall. Like, that's happened to me 3 times in the game already. So, all in all, I'd like to give this game a 6 out of 10 on the overall game rating, which isn't bad for this game, but it's definitely a hit to the franchise. It is a good game, all in all, but it's just not what I was looking forward to, and in my opinion, it was a disappointment. So this is the end of my time. Thank you for watching, and do not forget to like or favorite and subscribe for more from Rage Gamers.